It's Tuesday night. It's Shark Tank Live. We're going to be talking transfer portal with Mike Huseman from Mike Farrell Sports. He's the czar of that. We're going to talk some coaching stuff. Also, we have Dalen Flowers that's going to join us on the show. We're going to talk some Ole Miss stuff, and including a player that is just fascinating me. I'm kind of going down into the rabbit hole on this player right now. But anyway, this is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good evening. As we wait for Ole Miss to tip off against Mount St. Mary's, I do want to thank everybody for joining us. We do have Mike Huseman in the house today, and we have Dalen Flowers in the house today, and we're going to be talking a little bit of Ole Miss sports. And we're going to start with the transfer portal probably. And, let's just go ahead and get started with it. Mike Huseman joins the show along with Dalen Flowers. How are you guys doing? Dalen, how you been, bud?
Doing fantastic, man. I can't complain at all right now.
Yeah, we have an interesting situation that is developing. Chris Paul is the first major name that is set to visit. I talked to you last night about it, Dalen. I'll talk to Mike this time. What do you think about what are you hearing about Chris Paul?
I think at this point he's very likely to end up at Ole Miss. I would say it's the definitely the most likely outcome. 247 has him crystal ball there at this point. And it's looking good for you guys.
Are there any other players that you're hearing in the transfer portal that maybe Ole Miss fans need to keep their eyes on?
So the best player in the transfer portal so far is Walter Nolan, and I think they're in the game for him. So he just statistically going by peer rating coming out of high school, he is the best player to ever be in the transfer portal. And they got a good shot to get him, I think.
Yeah, for people that don't know, he's originally from Olive Branch, Mississippi, about 50 miles down the road, and that's the reason Ole Miss has a legit puncher's chance. And I like to point out something that I did on a show that I recorded that's going to air tomorrow, but I'll say it here tonight. Ole Miss gets to do something this year that they've never gotten to do, and that is they get to recruit to the playoff. And players like Walter Nolan comes in, it's like, hey, we can hook you up and we can do what you need to do NIL-wise, but also if you come here, we have a legit chance to get to the college football playoff. So if you want to win, if you want to do some things that's unexpected, if you want to get paid, come to Ole Miss because Ole Miss has the opportunity to do this, and this is something they've never had that opportunity before, Mike.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, and there are several guys who we've seen succeed at other schools for a year or two who they'll be able to sell that to, and I think they have a good shot to end up with. So,
Dalen Flowers, we had an interview with him last night, and he was talking about Chris Paul, and just full disclosure to everybody, Arkansas is kind of near and dear to his heart. So he knows a little bit about the Razorbacks. He knows a little bit about Chris Paul. Let everybody know what Ole Miss might be expecting if they were able to land Chris Paul.
An explosive and athletic linebacker, a guy that is really fast from edge to edge, and I think he is complementary to a Pete Golden type defense. And when I say that, when you watch Pete, he loves to send a lot of red zone blitzes and a lot of what I like to call attack swarm defense, and that's when a player, say a quarterback is throwing a football and the receiver catches it out. You see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys go after that receiver and try to tackle him. I think that's where Chris Paul kind of excels at. He plays everywhere, man. Like he can be right in the middle of the field, but then the play starts and he's at the line in a split second. He's a really fast, athletic guy and just loves to play all over the field. And I think Pete is going to that because we kind of lacked, I think, a guy at the linebacker position this year that was very vocal and that could play, in a zone coverage and in a man coverage as well. And I think Chris Paul kind of checks those boxes. One thing I saw from him over the past couple of years is vocal leadership. And I think that's something that Pete loves as well, because when you see Pete on the sideline, you see him going up and down the field yelling and trying to get his players to recognize him if he's trying to make a change. And I think if you have that type of player leadership on the field, that helps a lot of comfortability and that helps us go down for the long run as well on that side of the ball.
Hey, Mike, what are you hearing on Will Shepherd at the moment?
He is an Ole Miss offer, from what I understand, in Mississippi State. I heard they're both in for him. Mississippi State is an odd one at this point. It seems like any decent receiver who's entered, they're just throwing an offer at him. But I think Ole Miss has a good shot for Shepherd, as well as Robert Lewis, Georgia State, and Cyrus Allen, Louisiana Tech. So I think all three of those receivers you guys will have a shot at. But Shepherd's good. And I'm hearing that, from what I've seen, it sounds like Ole Miss, Tennessee, and Texas are schools that are interested.
Okay, what about edge players? I know there's one that just got into the portal that went to UTSA. There might be some kind of a Zachary Franklin connection. Had some pretty good numbers, an edge player. What edges should Ole Miss fans look for?
So looking at that position, there's R.J. Oben. Many people out there will remember Roman Oben, former offensive lineman in the NFL. His son, actually, R.J., just entered the portal. He was at Duke. We don't know if he's just going to go to Texas A&M or not. It's when you have a guy like that, you're unclear if they're just going to follow the coach. We don't know that for him. Another guy who I think they got a good shot at defensive front, Marley Cook, Middle Tennessee, who is a Mississippi native, Pearl, I believe, but or maybe it's Brumfield. There's two Middle Tennessee State guys, D lineman, linebacker.
I think Brumfield might be from Pearl, and Marley is from Water Valley or something like that. That may be flipped.
But there's the two Middle Tennessee guys. I think you guys will both have very good shot at. Jafari Harvey is an edge who is at Miami, and he's one we know has SEC, ACC offers. I don't know specifically what schools he's looking at. It was a big list, but he does have a lot of SEC, ACC looks, so he could be a guy to look at there as well.
Okay, Dalen. Transfer portal wise, I think there's an interior offensive lineman coming in from Indiana. I forget his name is Carter or something. Coming in and visiting this weekend. Ole Miss has had some interior offensive linemen already visit. People that need to understand that grad transfers, people can go at different times depending on what they are. So how important do you think the interior offensive line is? And is this a sign that Lane Kiffin is feeling pretty good about his outside tackle positions, like a Micah Pettis and a Jalen Williams, those type players, and they're just going to focus on the interior of the line?
Well, I think it is, and especially those two guys you named, Jalen Williams and Micah Pettis, they've entered the trenches of their years here. I think Jalen, this is his second year, and he's going into his third year. Micah's, of course, been in three years now. And that interior line was still kind of developing. It still has this throughout the late season. I think John Garrison, the new O-line coach, kind of developed the system, but the guys just kind of, I wouldn't say didn't buy in, but they took a lot of more time than we expected for them to find the keys to his system. And I think a little bit of inconsistency was very vital for us throughout the season. I think it's important for us to go get some guys in the portal at that position, because not only are we losing some guys on the O-line, but I think we have developed a system where we are really good at developing portal talent. And I think that's something that Lane and our entire team has kind of bought into. And at this point, just kind of what we've seen from transfers so far, we can never go wrong at that part of the game for us. So I would love to see it. And of course, that helps us in a many different type of ways. I think that helps us in the run game specifically, of course, with Q and Ulysses Bentley if he comes back. But, Lane Kiffin said in a presser a couple weeks ago how important Caden Prescore was to our run game. And I couldn't agree more to that. I would love to see how, Caden tries to come back, how we use the run game with new offensive lineman guys with him, because I think our run game, if you go back and watch some of our games, our run game develops so much better with Prescore on the line. So I would love to see how Prescore works with us and some different linemen, whether he's inside the block or outside. But I think it's really important because it allows our run game to get developed, and of course that opens up the offense a lot more for our passing game as well.
Michael Specs asked, really good panel, how much do we have in our war chest? And Michael, that's kind of an unknown number. It's all speculation, the way that they do these things. There's so much opacity in the way that they handle all of these deals. But we do know that the collective went over $10 million last January. You have to figure that they're at least 8 figures at this point. And I mean, they're actually acting like they have money. They're doing the things that you would do if you have money. It's not like they're struggling to get people to campus and things like that. So Walker Jones doing a fantastic job. Obviously, with Lane Kiffin, of course, you can just know that the collective is going to remain cutting edge as long as Lane Kiffin is kind of calling the shots as the head coach. So, Mike, we talked about wide receivers. I don't think – have you heard any skill position, not outside of wide receiver, like running backs and quarterbacks? Have you heard any names for Ole Miss in that one? Because I honestly don't want to speak this into existence because after last year, Ole Miss just doesn't need to do quarterbacks. So I'm a little bit worried. So you haven't heard anything in that area?
Not running back wise, no. And it makes sense. Who's going to want to go there knowing they're sitting behind Judkins and potentially Bentley if he comes back? I do think a fit guy, say if Bentley decides not to come back, Iowa DI, who is at North Texas, could fit a similar role and is in the portal. But that's purely skeptical. I don't know that Ole Miss is in for him, but he would fit scheme-wise if you guys don't have Bentley coming back.
Yeah, it should be interesting. Hey, we'll ask Dalen this one. He's got the ties in Arkansas. Any word on Charleston Collins?
That's a really good question, actually, and it's funny. He was here last year for a visit. I can't remember the game, and I made sure I spoke to him, and we have a connection together. Of course, I know who he is, and he's been on my radar for a couple of years. Really good talent, and honestly, man, I don't know anything factual wise, but I would really put us in a good word for a chance for him to, decommit from Arkansas and be a Rebel. I think he really enjoyed what Lane kind of talked to him about while his visit was here, and I think he's really not fully committed to Arkansas at this point. Honestly, of course, just the unquestionable thing going on in Fayetteville right now, just of course the culture there. I think he's kind of looking to be at a really big time school, and I would say the other school in a running for us with him would be LSU. I think those are his 2 top teams that he's probably going to be looking at if he doesn't stay at Arkansas. A really good talent, though. The kid is one of the quickest D linemen I've probably ever seen off the line, and I think the kid has a really good mindset. I think he's a really good coachable player as well, so he'll be a really good fun player to see if he, has a good chance of coming to us. But I really think he does. A really fun, exciting kid, and one of the kindest people I've ever met as well, too.
Mike, Samuel Lola, I guess that's from Pittsburgh.
Okunlola, yes.
Yes. He got an offer from Ole Miss. I guess he's an edge player. What's a little bit did you know about him?
He is probably the best edge player in the portal right now. He is very good, multiple year starter there. And not everybody let me rephrase that. A lot of people were surprised he entered. I think it kind of shocked some of those people. He's a little undersized. He's probably between 240 and 250. Very quick first step. Very disruptive in the backfield. He is a Northeast native. I think it's Boston or New York, but he's from up that direction. And I know coming out of high school, Georgia and Colorado were other schools that had offered him. I don't know if they'll be on him at this point. You'd think any school who needs an edge will be on him, though. I mean, he's that good. He's just top player.
And I've got another player for you right now, Will Lee, the cornerback out of Kansas State. He's getting offers from everybody. This is going to be a player that everybody's going to want. But Lane Kiffin went to Manhattan, Kansas on the first day of the portal opening. You have to think there's an offer there that he got from Ole Miss, and I'm assuming they're trying to get him to campus for a visit.
I have a list of 3 defensive backs here I like for you guys, and he's one of them. Okay. He's this year's John Saunders. I know you'll like that throwback, Steve.
Yes.
So
yeah, you're the one. You called John Saunders before anybody knew who he was last year.
But I think Lee is definitely in play for Ole Miss. The other 2 D-backs are Tegan Wilk, a safety from East Carolina, and Upton Stout, corner from Western Kentucky.
Okay. And
They could be other guys to look at.
there might be a tier situation where the 1A is Will Lee, and then Upton Stout is like the B player.
Certainly.
And they're just going to go down the list. I know that Ole Miss needs corners because they have DeAndre Prince, who has graduated, Zamari Walton, who has graduated. They have Chris Graves, and they have some players that can do it. But I think they're looking for somebody that can actually feel that need for them as well. All right, we're going to change gears a little bit. All right, we're going to talk about the Penn State Nittany Lions. I think Mike can handle that conversation a little bit.
I'm a Big Ten native. I can.
Yeah, the Penn State Nittany Lions, the Ole Miss opponent in the Peach Bowl. They're going to play this month, I should say. And it looks like there's been one opt-out so far, and it's Chop Robinson. He opted out today. They have two players in the top 32 in the PFF's draft rankings, including Chop Robinson, and a cornerback that is also on that list. Those are probably the two players that's going to end up opting out. And to me, that is a little bit interesting because with Micah Pettis for Ole Miss being a little bit injured, edge players were going to be disruptive in a greater sense in Ole Miss's offense than normally they otherwise would be. With Chop Robinson being out, that kind of helps Ole Miss, Mike.
It does. And one of the other guys you didn't talk about that will almost certainly opt out, Olu Fashanu. He will be a top 10, possibly top 5 pick in the draft at offensive tackle. And I would be very shocked if he plays in this game, and that will be a massive loss for the Nittany Lions.
What about Adisa Isaac? Well, what do you know about him?
That he runs the alleys very well and is a good, perimeter player there in that, kind of that hybrid role where he's curled a flat and, rushes the passer.
Okay.
Just right. Yeah.
And they have a middle linebacker in Abdul Carter, who's a pretty good ball player as well. These were all first team, all Big Ten players. Yep. And if you look at their defense as a whole, this is one of the most explosive defense. Now, Ole Miss played Texas A&M, and they're like number 2 in sacks and number 3 in TFLs. So we've seen an explosive defense this year, but Penn State this year had a really explosive defense. Everybody knows what type of a coach Manny Diaz is. We saw that when he was at Mississippi State. He has better athletes than he would have at Mississippi State, and he's implementing that disruptive type offense that he likes to do.
Yeah, I think you made a very good point about they were number 1 to A&M being number 2 with sacks. The big difference in it will be a challenge for Ole Miss is that A&M gave up a lot of big plays in the pass game. Penn State's not doing that. Now you do have the hypothetical there of, well, they weren't playing offenses that got big pass plays in the Big Ten as much this year. And the one that did Maryland, they played pretty well against. But yeah, that's those are certainly guys that'll be big losses.
Yeah, Dalen, this is probably the lone tempo team that Penn State is really going to run into. I don't think they've seen anything like this. And you're talking about a team that has been like a number 1 defense, and they are legitimately good defense. Don't hear me say that they're not a good defense. But whenever you have Iowa on your schedule, that is going to help the numbers because Iowa is, I don't want to say offensive impaired because that's kind of an insult to offensively impaired teams. They're legitimately bad team. And then you have like Michigan who beat Penn State and in the second half didn't have to throw a pass. And all of that tells me that they're really, really good, but maybe the numbers are kind of a false flag type situation, Mike.
Certainly. I mean, that in talking about Iowa, there was the great example of that. They're consistently ranked as one of the top defenses in the country. In fact, Phil Parker won the Broyles Award today as the top assistant in the country.
And he deserved it.
He did. But the way they play offense and special teams is complementary to the defense. Completely. So that is the way a lot of the Big Ten West isn't to that extreme, everybody. but it's the kind of ball they play right now. We're going to go and we're not going to make mistakes, and hopefully in the end we'll be able to eke one out. And Iowa won 10 games doing that this year.
All right, Dalen. All right, we've had this conversation, but we're going to have a little bit of a roundtable right now before we get out here in the last 10 minutes of the live stream, as Ole Miss and Mount St. Mary's is about to tip off. We're going to talk about the playoff and whether or not they got it right. And here we go. Number 1 seed Michigan, number 2 seed Washington, number 3 seed Texas, number 4 seed Alabama, number 5 seed Florida State, number 6 seed Georgia. Galen, tell me what you think of these playoff rankings.
I think the committee got it right. And I say this because I wasn't in shock when rankings came out. They put Bama forward. I really wasn't in awe. And it's because I realized a couple of years ago that the committee wasn't into appeasing the public, and when I say that they are committed to putting the 4 best teams in, and I just think this is what they thought was the 4 best teams, according to, of course, what Boo said yesterday or a couple of days ago on the show, that just because of the essence of Jordan Travis and his missing, publicity for that team for Florida State, you could see a difference in that team. Now, I don't know how much of that would have made a difference, but I guess the opposing B was they didn't want to re-implement stage of TCU and Georgia like the national championship game was last year. I don't know how much of a difference that game of Florida State and Michigan would have been. But I think they got it right. But at the same time, I believe Florida State has a right to feel the way they feel. And they definitely do. The undefeated season, conference champion. But it reminds me a lot of 2017, and I mentioned this before, when they put Bama in over Ohio State, who was a 2-loss team but was conference champion. Bama was a 1-loss team but didn't even go to Atlanta. They believe that if they put the 4 best teams in, not based on a resume or not based on the political view, that they've done their jobs. And I think that's what they feel right here. I think that these are the 4 best teams. And if we just kind of match up from start to finish, I think they got it right here. It was a tough decision, but that's what they're there for. And I think it's the correct decision to move on forward as well. But at the same time, I think it's funny that we're in this predicament. And that's why we're having the 12-team playoff come up next year. I think it's the best time for it to be happening, because every single year we're kind of getting to that point where it's more confusion on who deserves to be a 4, who deserves to be a 3. So I think it's the perfect time for that 12-team playoff to be coming in the midst.
All right, Mike, what do you think about this?
I think there is no right or wrong. There is only opinion at this point on who should be that 4 team. And very few people's minds will be changed at this point. And it's one of those, I think 2 things are true at once. Did they get the 4 best teams right now? Probably. Did Florida State also get screwed? Probably. Both of those things, I think, are true. FSU did everything they can to deserve to go to the playoffs, and they have a right to feel undone. Conversely, Alabama can feel like, we lost a game a few months ago and we just beat the team that had been number 1 for a while, so we deserve to be that 4 team. So I think it's not a matter of right, wrong, because we don't have the criteria for it to be right or wrong, because we don't really know how they weight certain things. So that's my thoughts on it, basically.
Gary Rasco put out, if they were really going to put the 4 best teams in, Georgia would be there instead of Washington. He's got a point there. I mean, if you're going to do 4 best, you have to do 4 best.
Why is Georgia ahead of Alabama, or why is Washington the team we're taking out though instead of Alabama?
I think they're talking about that because if you look at Washington, had like 6 games.
Absolutely,
yeah. They just really showed up against Oregon, and props to them for that, because that was the game that mattered. They absolutely showed up in that. But I think that is the reason people are talking about that. And
you remember last week near the end, I asked you about the second order wins and the advanced metrics at the end. Those metrics look really bad for Washington. Like their second order wins are like 3 or 4 less than what their actual win total is.
Yeah, and I think Washington has a chance to really show up against Texas. I think that game is going to be really good. I think that game is going to be better than the Alabama-Michigan game. But we'll see exactly how that goes. Now, the way I sit on this playoff thing is I think two things. I think Florida State got royally screwed, and the kids, I feel for them. I'm completely empathetic about it. But I think the four best teams, or not necessarily four teams, the right four teams got put in. And you're going to get the best games and all of that happens. This was a situation to where there's been four playoff spots for 5 conference champions essentially from the beginning. This statistically was going to happen eventually.
Yeah.
And if you look at what happened in 2004, when the computers were making 100% of the choices, this happened to Auburn. The SEC champion got left out in 2004. For USC, and Oklahoma was the beneficiary of that. So you have a situation to where I think they probably got the 4 right teams at, but I do feel bad for Florida State. Now, this is something that I will say. When Texas and Oklahoma called the SEC to get in because they just decided to leave the Big 12 in a lurch a little bit. I mean, they decided to do that. So they called the SEC to let us in. The Big Ten freaked out and they created what they called the Alliance. And people on my Twitter feed know exactly what I'm about to say. The whole purpose of that alliance was to slow down the 12-team playoff that was supposed to be implemented in 2023. If that would have been allowed to continue, Florida State would have had a home playoff game against Liberty, and nobody would have been talking about anything except Oklahoma didn't make it in and Ole Miss did. And Oklahoma has a loss to Kansas and got beat by Oklahoma State, who got boat raced by South Alabama. There's no argument at that point. This would have been the cleanest playoff in the history of playoffs whenever you look at what happened, if they would have been allowed to go to 12 teams. But the commissioner of the Big Ten, the commissioner of the ACC, and the commissioner of the Pac-12 decided they were going to do whatever they can to slow down the proceedings. Turns out an ACC team was screwed by their own actions. Whenever you have a committee in this situation, it's their job to take arrows. It's their job for all the stuff that people are mad about. It is their job to take these arrows. But if you look at the actual reason that we're in this predicament, it is the 3 commissioners in the Pac-12, the Big Ten, and the ACC. And now there is no Pac-12. And now the ACC got screwed, and the only winner in this whole situation was Fox and the Big Ten. And that is kind of where we are at the moment. So I think the right teams are in. Florida State got absolutely screwed, but everybody is putting blame on the committee when they should be blaming those commissioners. That is my opinion on that. Dalen?
I agree with you, man. And I think it's funny that we're in this position because when you look at everything, and one thing as well, man, I can tell you what, all the OU fans that have been on my timeline and all over social media this weekend as well, just seeing how they thought they deserved to be in is hilarious. But you think about the position we're in, we've never really thought that we come to this position, because I think when Jordan Travis went down Florida State, I don't think a lot of people thought they would end up still undefeated. So they thought this kind of situation would not even happen in the first place. And so once we got here, I kind of think everyone was like, okay, well, what do we do now? And so I think the committee and everyone involved as well was kind of just caught off guard. But look, at the same time, we're in a changing landscape of football. And so we have to understand that we have to adapt to different things. And sometimes everything isn't going to go our way, whether that's for us or anyone else. It's not going to go our way at all times. And again, like Mike said, I don't know if it's a right or wrong answer, but like it is what it is. And at the same time, I didn't think the committee was going to leave an SEC team out. And so we're in this position now. Let's just enjoy football. All I can say, man.
Yeah, the committee was never going to leave an SEC. In fact, Florida State is probably in the playoff if they were going head-to-head against any team that wasn't Alabama. Yes. And all of the stuff that everybody's going to think whenever I'm saying that, a lot of that is deserved from Alabama. And if you look at the reaction from Michigan players when Alabama came up on the screen,
yeah,
that kind of lets you know that Alabama probably deserved to be in there, because Michigan legitimately did not want to play that game, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, right now, would you rather play Bama or a Florida State team who's going to play either Rademacher or Brock Glenn? Clearly, you would rather roll the dice with that Florida State team who is not going to have a passing attack.
Yeah, it's a situation to where, honestly, Michigan thought they were about to have a bye. They were about to have a bye week into the national championship game. And it turns out they don't. Now they've got probably the hardest game as a number 1 seed. This would be like Kansas getting in as a number 1 seed in the NCAA basketball tournament, and then they look down at the number 16 and it's Kentucky. That's what Michigan's going through. And honestly, with all the storylines with Michigan, they probably kind of deserve that matchup anyway. And that's going to be the most college football game potentially of all time, I think.
Yeah, it'll be up there.
Yeah, really good. Anyway, thanks everybody for joining us tonight. We're getting ready for the Ole Miss Mount St. Mary's game. We'll let you free for that, and we'll be back here next Tuesday. Tomorrow, we do a preview of the key matchups between Ole Miss and Penn State. It's Ole Miss's offense, Penn State's defense. I do talk about Chop Robinson because that was recorded before he opted out. But we also have stuff about Deion Smith and the wide receiver room as a whole. I do want to thank Mike Huseman for joining us. I do want to thank Dalen Flowers very much. And thanks everybody for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. I do want to thank everybody, and we will see you later. Also, SEC After Dark tomorrow night. Take care, everyone.